In this video, I want to talk about how to retire after high school. And I know that's a pretty audacious title. And when I say retire, I don't mean like never do anything for the rest of your life. Not that type of retirement, but the retirement where you no longer need to work for money. And hopefully I want to convince you by the end of this video that not only is it fairly simple to do, not for you, but for your children, but it's absolutely necessary for you to think about the next 20, 30 years this way. Now, before I get into all that, I just kind of want to give you a little bit of background about me so you understand who I am, where I'm coming from, why I'm sharing what I'm sharing. I was around 10, 11 years old. My mom got one of the first computers in her neighborhood, and I got really interested in trying to make this computer do all kinds of cool things. I saw somebody teaching the computer how to do something, and that really fascinated me. I was like, I want to be able to tell a computer what to do. You know, it's kind of like having a free servant. And I was like, how do I do that? And then I went to the local library and I tried to find some books on coding, and I kind of figured things out. Now, this was before the days of Google, before the days of really internet search engines, where now it's like super easy. So it was a bit of a challenge, but I was up to the task. I really enjoyed the whole discovery of it. And so I got fairly decent around 13, 14. My brother and myself, both of us were around 13, 14. And we started this little software company where we made all kinds of cool products. One was a virtual piano. I wanted to be able to play a piano on the computer because we didn't actually have a real piano. So we made a little app to do that. And then we made some games and stuff, and then we started putting them on download.com, which was like the app store of the internet back in the day, and I started making a bunch of money. But then what happened was we forgot to renew our domain name, so a bot basically came and it took our domain name. And we were kids, 13, 14, we didn't really value money at the time, so we just kind of let the whole thing die. And then what happened, fast forward a few years, is my mom, she slipped on some ice, she broke her leg, and she had to be out of work for a year, and my parents got divorced around that time. And my dad was going to move back to Pakistan, which is the country where we came from. And, you know, he was driving a taxi here. So he's like, if I go back and I'm earning rupees in Pakistan, he's definitely not going to be able to support a family in dollars. We live in Canada. So I was like, okay, this is a problem. You know, we need to do something. So I was in second year university at that time. So I decided I'm going to drop out and try to make something work. So at that point, I had to ask myself, what are the skills that I have to make something happen? And the only real skill I had was coding and making stuff. So then what I did was I ended up going through a few different ideas. Like my first 4 or 5 different ideas of things that I built flopped. But then the 5th or 6th idea was this search engine optimization software, SENuke. You can probably still Google it, it's already, and there's information about it out there. It was basically the first ever automated search engine optimization tool of its kind, and it helped you get to the top of Google. So anybody who kind of used my software, they put in their website and they filled out a bunch of stuff, and it helped them get to the top of Google for their keywords. And this is back in like 2008. Everybody kind of went crazy for that. Who doesn't want to be number one on Google for their keywords? So we had, thousands of businesses take us up on that. And I was selling the software for a monthly fee. It started off $100 a month and then $150 a month. We later increased the price. And it was just kind of a snowball effect. We built something that the world wanted, and all of a sudden, we had all this money coming in. And later, once I was no longer involved with the business, and I'll give the whole story in a separate video, I don't want to bore you with the details. Once I was no longer involved with the business, I basically took that money and I invested it into a few tech companies that I understood, like Amazon, Shopify, and most recently Tesla. And then those investments did well. And so, I got to a point where I will never need to worry about money again. Now, the reason that I'm sharing this with you is because the world is rapidly changing. And right now, people are kind of still functioning. Most of the world is still functioning the way that people have functioned for the last 50, 100 years. You go to high school, then you go to university, you learn something, and then you make a career out of it. But we're getting to a point now where the things that our kids are going to be studying in school, those careers won't even exist Many of them won't even exist by the time the kids come out. And the reason for that is simply automation and how quickly artificial intelligence is getting better. If you don't believe me, watch the documentary on Netflix called AlphaGo, which is about Google creating some artificial intelligence to beat Go, which is something that they once thought was not possible. If you look at all the progress that all these self-driving cars are doing, for example, Tesla is very close to solving self-driving. And you can see these examples all around us of technology basically replacing human beings. I don't really think I need to tell you much more about that. I think it's everybody sees it. I think everybody sees it happening around them. So this is kind of the world that we're going into, and most of the world is unprepared for it, and which is why, I'm not going to call myself some kind of savior, but I see it so clearly. And most of the world doesn't see it. So that's why I'm making this video, to hopefully kind of elaborate on what is going on and what you can do about it. How can you think about your kids' future over the next 20, 30 years about this? So normally what would happen is, people, they would go to school. For example, you go to school for medicine, and then you come out a doctor, and now you're practicing medicine, and that's your whole career. But and AI is already getting to the point where there's already bots out there. Like one bot is called Buoy Health, and basically you give it a bunch of symptoms, and then it's very accurate based on data of thousands and thousands of examples. It very accurately gives you a diagnosis. And this is simply data processing. It takes information and then it kind of figures out what the issue could be at hand based on thousands of examples, and then it kind of tells you. And I've personally used it. I've used it for my family, and the results are actually pretty amazing. Increasingly, this is going to be applied across all the types of jobs that people go to school for. Some of the last jobs to be affected most likely will be the ones that actually involve physical labor, because we're not good at building machines that actually move their arms and legs. But if you Google the Tesla bot, they're working on a humanoid robot that will be doing that very soon. Now, by soon, I mean like it's probably going to take like 20, 30 years to be good at it, but definitely by the time that our kids kind of get to that age, there will be humanoid robots doing a lot of the work that people are manually doing. Now, some fields are going to become obsolete quicker than others, obviously. Like I said, the ones that involve physical labor, those will be one of the last ones to go, like, for example, barbers and tradesmen. But the ones that simply involve using your mind, which is, most of the fields today, those are going to be amongst the first to go. And if you really think about it, there are people in the world creating intelligence, and then there is the rest of the world using intelligence. And creating intelligence will, in the long run, always beat using intelligence. So that kind of is the message that I'm trying to get out there. Not only is there a way to easily retire after high school, I think it is actually a necessity to start thinking of the world this way, because of how rapidly the world is changing. So now, what do I mean by when I say retire after high school? I don't mean, sitting on your butt and doing nothing for the rest of your life. I just mean being in a financial position where you don't need to work, where you can choose what to do with your life. Otherwise, what's going to happen is, when we have this technocracy, these people at the tops of their field in technology, like the owners of Tesla and Amazon and that type of stuff, they're going to be the ones benefiting from all the revenue of this automation, and then the rest of the world that is going to be jobless. And we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but people are discussing universal basic income, which is basically these tech companies are going to provide some kind of income and assistance to the rest of the world, because there won't be too many jobs left to do. And so what it will do is like the rest of the world will basically be earning the same amount of income, and then there's the technocracy, the people who really understand tech, who know it, and they're going to be the ones earning in the big bucks. And those who are kind of unprepared for it, those who are afraid of technology, they're actually going to be in a pretty bad position, because they do run the risk of becoming irrelevant. So what can you do about it? all you have to do, in my opinion, is, and I have a son, he's 8 years old, and I have a daughter, she's 5, and the biggest problem I think is right now, if you see how kids behave, okay, they go to school, they come back, and they spend the rest of the day on video games. When I was growing up, for some reason, it never really appealed to me to play video games. I guess I got really lucky in the sense that I found a lot more joy in actually making stuff instead of actually playing a game. Like, I didn't want to dance when other people told me to dance. I wanted to make people dance myself. That's something that I had naturally in me. And that is basically the difference between a consumer and a producer. You want to change your mindset from somebody who simply consumes things, who consumes video games, who consumes media, who consumes books, who consumes entertainment, to somebody who actually produces. So the one rule, and I think this is one rule that will be a game changer if you were to instill this in your household, is I'm hoping you have kids young enough that are starting high school, and this video is actually meant for that type of audience, parents who have young kids. If you have that type of situation, then the one rule that I plan on instilling in my own home is that the only games that you're allowed to play are the ones that you make yourself. I think if you just instill that one rule, everything else will kind of fall into place. And let me explain why. Video games, they're actually quite, they're much better than, like, for example, other types of addictions and stuff, but they themselves are an addiction. And what they do is they hijack your dopamine. And so if you don't know what dopamine is, it's these brain chemicals that give you a feeling of you've actually accomplished something, you're actually going somewhere. And these games are engineered in a way that makes the kids that are playing it, makes them addicted to it, and they feel like they're actually doing something with their lives when they're actually not going anywhere. So you want to steer your kids away from that type of addiction. And the idea is that if you tell them, hey, you're only allowed to play the games that you make, that's going to teach them how to talk to a computer. It's going to teach them to get comfortable with technology. And if they can make video games, they're going to be able to build basically anything, because video games, in fact, good video games are one of the hardest things to build. So you're going to find out that eventually your kids will just lose interest in making video games, and they're going to start building other cool stuff that they wish existed in the world. And that's exactly what you want to happen. Around 10, 11, 12, you want to start teaching them how to think like this. And so the idea is that from 10 to, let's say, 25, you have 15 years where you don't have any dependence on, you don't have any mouths to feed, you don't have a spouse. And in those 15 years, you want your kids to be able to build all kinds of cool things that they wish that existed in the world. So you're going to have kids that, go from, instead of complaining about a problem, instead of saying, oh, this game sucks, this app sucks, oh, I wish things were this way, you're going to start having kids now who are going to say, hey, this problem is a cool problem. Maybe I can fix it. Maybe I can build something that fixes this. And you can build using physical world objects, like you can build actual robots, which is really cool. I encourage that. But I have always found that software is actually, being able to build software is kind of a superpower, in the sense that it doesn't cost anything for you to build something that can be used by millions or billions of people. I mean, look at the founders of Facebook, Instagram. These guys built something that billions of people use, and they literally coded it themselves. One or two people in a garage can code it. And that is kind of a superpower that does not exist with, for example, building robots. Because when you're building robots, you need to order the parts, and you need to actually, wait for them to arrive. There's actual physical money involved. Whereas, with computer software, everything just kind of happens on your computer. And not only is there physical cost involved in building the first version of the robot, now if you want to actually scale it, if you want to build hundreds of thousands or millions of robots, now you got to worry about, manufacturing, which is another very difficult thing. You got to, find a big factory, and you got to figure out how the manufacturing is going to happen. So it adds a lot more complexity that software doesn't. So And software, everybody has a computer. Everybody can just kind of sit by themselves and build something that is incredibly, tremendously useful that the world can benefit. So the idea is basically that in those 15 years that you have before you have any dependents under you, if you were to simply build cool things that you wish existed in the world and you were to tell people about it as you're building it, eventually you're going to build something that the world wants. And that's kind of how it played out in my life. And that's how I think it will play out in your kids' lives if you choose to kind of go this way. And let's say worst case scenario, 15 years go by and they haven't managed to build something that the world is responding to. What's happening now is that you have these tech companies like Tesla, Facebook, Google. They increasingly don't care where you went to school, what you studied. And so what's going to happen is now you've got 15 years of cool projects under your belt, or even let's say 10 years or even 5 years. And now you're going to be able to say, hey, look, listen, tech company, I didn't go to school XYZ, or maybe you did go to school XYZ, but I also have all this cool stuff that I've built. And that is a lot more impressive to an employer in the tech space, as somebody who has that kind of interest, who has that kind of background, as opposed to somebody who simply went to school, for computer science, and this is kind of their first job. People who kind of grew up, it's a passion, they live it, they breathe it, it shows in your accomplishments, it shows in your achievements. And so worst case scenario, you don't end up building something that the world wants. Now you can get a high paying job at one of these tech companies, and they're going to be paying the most amount of money out of any company. I can almost guarantee you that. Another option is, instead of kind of getting a job at one of these tech companies, now you're 25, you know how to build anything. And you just haven't managed to find a problem that resonates with the world. Well, if you think about Silicon Valley and you look at software startups, the biggest cost of any startup is the cost of engineering. And so if you have the ability to build something yourself, your cost of engineering basically goes to zero. And marketing is fairly simple. If you build a product that the world really likes, like for example, Tesla, for example, they don't run any ads. You have these cars that are like the coolest thing in the world. They drive themselves and they've got all this cool tech and people just talk about it. Having a great engineering skill, the marketing, you can easily find marketing talent. I'm not going to say marketing is not important, but what I'm going to say is knowing how to build stuff is far more important. If you can build cool products, and you just haven't found a cool product to build, you just haven't found a good problem to solve, then what you can do, at the age of 25 or whatever, where it's like, no, I need to make money now, is you basically start talking to people what their problems are that are still unsolved by technology, and then you kind of lead the charge. And so now your motivation becomes extrinsic, not intrinsic. Now you're doing it for the money, which is a less strong motivation, but at that age you might have a strong motivation, a strong desire for money, so it might be a good enough motivator. And then instead of building for yourself, you start building for other people. You start asking around, seeing what people want, and then you start building products like that. So do that for another 5 or so years, talk to a whole bunch of people, and you will definitely find something that the world wants, and you can kind of build a company out of that. One thing that you have to be careful of is not criticizing whatever your kids as they build them. The motivation has to be intrinsic. They need to feel, so there's two types of motivations: extrinsic motivation or intrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation is somebody's telling you to do something, or you're getting paid to do something. You will do it, people do it, but they don't do it with the same heart and the same passion. That's something that has intrinsic motivation, something that you want to build, something that you want to do. So that's the type of stuff you do in your spare time. And you want the motivation for this to be intrinsic. You want the kids to be able to build whatever the heck they want and be proud of it, and be the first users of the product. If you are the user of your own product that you're building, you know exactly what you need to build, and you'll be proud of it. And initially, like in the first years, up until like university or so, kids don't really care about money too much, and that's good, because you will build things that you want to do and you'll take a lot of pride in it. And the idea is not that you're going to hit a home run with the first thing that you build or the second thing that you build, but eventually the idea is iteration. Iteration is basically you build something, you tell the world about it, you look at the feedback, and if it's good, you double down on it. If it's bad, you pivot and you focus on something else. And that's how I think a lot of the world needs to start looking at life, in that, you don't take anything personally. You don't let your emotions get the best of you. You simply look at it. Everything I'm building, it's kind of an experiment. If it works out, great. If not, I'm going to move on to something else. And 15 years of this is a very long time. If your kids are constantly building stuff, they're constantly telling people, what's going to happen is eventually they're going to build something that their friends are going to be like, yo, this is really cool. And then, they start telling the world about it, and, the world kind of catches on, and then you make a software company out of that. Now, in a future video, I'm going to talk about what do you do to quote unquote retire once you actually have built a software company, because a software company is a lot of work, but you don't have to stay in that company. You can kind of hire employees, and you kind of take yourself out of the equation, and I'll elaborate on that in a later video. But that's basically the idea. You keep building stuff, and then you let the world know, and eventually you're going to build something that the world wants. Now, it's actually very, very, I'm not going to say it's super simple, but I think if you instill that one rule in your home, the only games you're allowed to play are the ones you build yourself. It will encourage your kids to go out and search for how to learn how to make games. And right now my son is around 8. I think it's still a bit early to get him into this. Over the next couple of years, I'm planning on kind of doing this as a full-time effort. Well, not necessarily a full-time effort, but as I do it, I want to be able to share with you guys, if you're interested, how I'm actually going about, what apps is he using, how is he learning coding, and the whole mindset about it. So if you're interested in that, give me a like, give me a subscribe, follow me, and hopefully I'll keep pushing out more stuff that can help the world, and help people see things differently, because I do think this message needs to get out there, and the ones who are not aware of this, they're going to be left behind in a dramatic fashion. So yeah, leave a comment, let me know what you guys think, and talk to you soon.